So before I start, I have two preliminary comments. I know there will be so many questions to my presentation, so I invite you all to read my article to find deeper understanding on issues that I'm going to discuss. But more on serious note, of course, you can ask, and I will try to reply as much as I can. And also I would like to thank the organizers to put my presentation after Marco's, because he was talking about national security uses of AI, and I am traditionally focused more on a military application. So I will also draw from his conclusions on AI Act. And basically in this presentation, I want to just show. So my presentation is much more theoretical. If you had hard time finding any kind of international tribunals judgments on AI and national security, you can easily imagine how hard it is to find that in military domain. There is no case law, although the interesting fact is that the military applications are being discussed longer, I would say, than the civilian applications. And still, in civilian applications, we have already the AI. We have already, right? But it will be like implemented soon, the AI Act. And for military domain, there is nothing yet. Even the negotiations are not opened. So in my article, I try to see whether we can have some kind of guidance from the civilian applications, discussions and regulations for military application, especially for EU member states, and coming from the assumption that there is a rule-based order to which the EU member states want to comply with this and create this rule-based order. I'm arguing that they should actually consider the regulations in civilian applications of AI when they are discussing the military applications, especially because of the dual use challenges, etc. So I will just quickly maybe go through what happened with AI Act and ethical underpinnings of that. So probably you know that there was this AI high-level expert group that elaborated ethical foundations, which we all know, and which are the human oversight, reliability, privacy data, so the fuel of the AI, transparency, explainability, of course for EU diversity, non-discrimination and fairness, so fundamental rights, and of course this should be AI for human kind, for wealth of humankind, so our well-being and environmental aspects as well, and the most important part for lawyers, so accountability. So those were the ethical underpinnings, and based on that, if you go through AI Act, you will see that they are being referred to very often, not only in preamble, but also in many specific provisions. So, as Marco explained in March, I guess, already, I would like just to say that this AI Act is taking the risk-based approach that I also argued should be applied in military domain. So, what is the most important part is that EU states said that there are some unacceptable risks, that we don't want some kind of AI in our zone, in our European zone, yeah, legal and personal, etc. And then if there is just a high risk and we can introduce some mitigating measures, we will do so. So please focus on those two first groups. And the examples also that Marco mentioned that include the unacceptable risk, the things we don't want to have, is this manipulation through AI, social scoring, real-time biometric observation, etc. So things that seem less dangerous than killing through AI, at least to me. And for the lower risk that we accept, but we still consider it a high risk, there are rigorous requirements, but mainly of procedural nature. And what is very important, they are in the AI Act, those requirements are put on economic entities, providers of AI, so not states. And when we discuss military AI, we are mainly concerned with states. Military, armed forces, this is all emanation of state. So in EU, we have requirements put on companies, and in the military domain on states. So why? Okay. Also Marco mentioned the exclusion. I actually took some time to read that exclusion. It's not easy thing because it's written in a horrible way. So this is a summary of that. So military, defense, and national security applications of AI are being excluded. What is important is that the whole language of AI Act is the use case language. So it's not that technology is bad, but some applications of that technology are bad or should be regulated. And also in the exclusion, it's interestingly underlined that purposes of military defense and national security applications of AI are excluded, and no matter whether those uses are performed by public entities, meaning state, military, etc., and private entities. So as for me, I think that this is probably about private military companies, but I would love to discuss why private entities are here for military and defense if it's not about private military companies. But so this is the use case language. And interestingly, the AI Act is saying that once an AI system is developed for military purpose, so it's excluded from AI. But if it's at some point of time, for some time being or permanently used for other purposes, it comes back to the scope of AI Act. So it means that basically the producer will have to really consider the possibility of the system to be compliant with AI Act. For me, it's a rather complicated structure, but so if something is being produced for military purpose but can be used for civilian humanitarian law enforcement, so this is also interesting between law enforcement and national security domain, it has to be compliant with AI Act. And based on that reading of the exclusion, I am drawing the conclusion that, as we also discussed yesterday, as Balint discussed these economic aspects of exclusions, I think that this is, in this case, is very useful for EU member states to use this procedural aspect that we don't have competence to regulate national security and military and defense in EU, so we exclude those uses. But basically, saying that once this same system is coming back to different domain of civilian and humanitarian law enforcement use, it is covered by this. It is I know it's confusing because it was confusing for me as well, and I believe that this is just kind of an excuse, this procedural issue, and I argue that the normative framework, those ethical underpinnings, and human rights, and all the normative frameworks that are applicable in armed conflicts, so military applications of AI, are very similar. Of course, in AI, in armed conflict, we accept killing of people, which is legal, and there is no accountability for that. But those ethical issues that we have with AI applications in civil domain are pretty the same as in law of armed conflicts. So states who regulated the civilian applications of AI in general purpose AI Act should rather draw from this when they are discussing the military regulation, the regulation of military AI application, especially that in AI Act it's been said that this is a traditional approach, that military and defense issues are better regulated by public international law. And this is again coming back to what Marco said, that, well, public international law also includes human rights and certain common baselines based on human dignity. So this AI Act is a general purpose regulation. It's a starting point. We know that it's going to be complemented by targeted regulations for specific domains. The main burden for compliance is on providers, on economic entities that want to introduce that technology on the market. It's a use case language which is commendable, and it's a basis for regulation of trustworthy AI, and for that I believe that it should be also somehow considered in discussions on military AI. And here is something I tried to do, so use the definition of AI from AI Act to explain what are the autonomous weapon systems, so those military applications, and you see it's not a short one, but let's say the military application of AI that is being discussed for 10 years is about AI systems that are intended for military purposes, which exhibit adaptability post-deployment by operators. So after a human being is putting them in the battlefield or in the operational framework. And they are capable of inferring from received inputs, data, how to generate outputs, so decision recommendations, predictions, all types of that, that identify and select military targets, and this action may influence actually our real-world physical environment and potentially result in serious incidents, in this case, violations of international humanitarian law. And the whole discussion about military AI is the current law, the general public international law, IHL, enough? And of course, there are different statements by different states, and I think we will not come to the point where we will have one unified position on that, but the main principles of distinction, proportionality, precautions I was talking about in March, those are the pillars to which all the time we are referring to, we're talking about law and military application. But we also saw the same things as with civilian applications. So everyone is worried about the accountability gap, and human oversight, human control is also being mentioned. So what I'm trying to argue in my article is that states need to take a proactive stance. They need to pronounce themselves on the acceptable level of risk in armed conflict, as they expressed it in the AI Act, saying that social scoring is contrary to our fundamental rights. So maybe they would be able also to say what situations are unacceptable in armed conflict, and to do so in a way that they did it in the AI Act. So adopt a risk-based approach and prohibit some uses of autonomous weapon systems, and then regulate with mitigation measures, with some procedural requirements, others. And I found during my research two recent interesting positions. The first is two-tier approach from July 2022 of Western European states that are exactly proposing in a very generic and very general, rather short paper that, yeah, we should prohibit some uses of military AI and regulate the others, and much more detailed and very interesting, and I invite you to read it, and not only because Poland is the only country from EU that signed that, and Poland is calling it a group of G7, you know, the only G7 that we belong to, but to be more serious, this is the military cooperation of, you know, of those states, and they presented a very detailed draft articles last year in May, and they actually are convergent on unacceptable risk, although they use different wording and it's very hard to read through what do they really mean. So the first two-tier approach is saying that those systems that operate entirely outside of human control and responsible chain of command should be prohibited de jure in a legally binding regulation. And the draft articles are saying that only those systems that are designed, intended to contravene, to violate IHL principles should be unacceptable, which is actually a very, you know, idem per idem, like something that is illegal, of course. But what they converge on is to retain human control, human chain of command, and both positions are placing this accountability burden on commanders. This is something that is being repeated for 10 years, but I believe that those draft articles are actually providing very detailed, and I described this in article, very detailed safeguards that should be implemented, starting with the human-machine interface, the training of soldiers on how to use those applications, and to maintain this human chain of command within the military forces. So to sum up, I believe that no matter whether we talk about civilian or military uses of AI, because we know that the same system can be used for both, there are the common ethical principles, underpinnings like human dignity, human oversight, and need to manage the risks. And AI was faster, like AI Act was faster because it was easier just to adopt a regulation, not the regulation or directive in the meaning of EU law, but just to regulate economic entities that are producing that for profit, then negotiate and implement a multilateral arms treaty. So for that, probably we won't have it very soon, but we see that through the soft law, through the position of states, this approach is being more or less harmonized with what was presented in EU. And, well, again, to repeat my argument, like if our member states are committed to upholding the rules expressed in Fundamental Rights Charter and European Convention on Human Rights and this rule-based order, they should actively articulate that and in legally binding manner also when it comes to military applications. And this is, of course, a theoretical article of a legal scholar, but we also have to take into consideration that due to the current geopolitical situation, we more hear about states, European states withdrawing from currently binding on them than the arms treaties like Ottawa Convention or other treaties because of the security risk created by Russia. So maybe this rule-based order is not enough in our modern times. So thank you so much.